Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was rejected by the Justice League and led the Injustice League. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world ended and began again in a scream of tearing metal and blinding, viridian light. One moment, Izuku Midoriya was pushing One for All to its screaming precipice, the familiar agony of power a roaring furnace in his limbs as he moved to intercept a villain whose quirk was unraveling the very fabric of space. The next, that fabric had caught him, snagged him like a thread in a loom, and pulled. There was no sense of movement, only a violent, instantaneous deconstruction. He felt his atoms being stretched across an impossible distance, his consciousness smeared into a thin line of agonizing awareness. The voices of the vestiges, his constant companions within the core of One for All, became a cacophony of static-laced shrieks, then faded into a distant, tinny whisper, like a radio station falling out of range. The connection, his lifeline to the generations of heroes before him, frayed and grew thin. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Izuku slammed into solid ground, the impact rattling his teeth and sending a fresh wave of agony through a body already bruised and battered from the preceding fight. He landed on his side in a heap of tangled limbs, his breath knocked from his lungs in a ragged gasp. The world resolved itself slowly, swimming into focus through a haze of pain, asphalt, cold and wet. The smell of rain-soaked concrete, rotting garbage, and something else, a heavy, cloying scent of exhaust fumes, thicker and more acrid than he was used to. He pushed himself up, his muscles protesting with every movement. His hero costume, the Gamma version he was so proud of, was torn at the shoulder and knee, the dark green fabric stained with grime and a smear of his own blood. The iron soles of his boots scraped against the gritty ground. He was in an alley. A narrow, dark chasm between two impossibly tall buildings. Unlike the familiar mix of old and new architecture in Mizurifu, these structures were monolithic titans of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the low-hanging, slate-gray clouds. The sky felt higher here, the scale of everything wrong. Where am I? The thought was a panicked flare in the confusion. He checked himself over. No life-threatening injuries, just a collection of deep bruises, a likely concussion, and the gnawing ache of power recall. He tried to reach inward for One for All, to feel the familiar, comforting wellspring of power. It was there. But it was different. The roaring furnace was now a nervous, high-frequency hum under his skin. The connection to the vestiges was still present, but it felt like listening to a conversation through a wall. Muffled. Distant. He could feel their presence, a faint echo of concern, but their guidance, their clarity, was gone. He was alone with the power in a way he hadn't been since the beginning. A cold knot of fear tightened in his stomach. Okay, Midoriya, think, he muttered, his voice hoarse. He pressed a hand to his head, trying to anchor himself. Assess the situation. That's what Aizawa-sensei would say. Rule 1, understand your environment. He peeked out of the alley's mouth. The street was a torrent of motion and noise. Sleek, strangely shaped cars hummed past, their sounds a low thrum instead of the familiar rumble of combustion engines. The people on the sidewalks moved with a purpose he recognized. But their clothes were different, their faces sharp and angular in a way that felt subtly foreign. And the language, he could hear snippets of conversation, vendors calling out, horns blaring, but the words were English. He understood it, thanks to present mixed mandatory classes, but hearing it as the default, the overwhelming norm, was deeply unsettling. He wasn't in Japan. He wasn't even in a part of the world he could readily identify. The villain's quirk, it hadn't just teleported him. A different dimension? Is that even possible? His mind, the analytical engine that had filled countless notebooks, spun into overdrive, desperately trying to find a logical foothold. If it was a dimensional rift, the energy principles would have to be. A deafening explosion cut through his frantic thoughts. It wasn't the sound of a villain's quirk, it was sharper, more technological. A building down the street erupted in a shower of glass and plaster. People screamed, a universal sound of terror, and began to run, a panic tide flowing away from the chaos. Izuku's hero instincts, ingrained deeper than any fear, took over. He didn't think. He reacted. Pushing the throbbing in his head aside, he channeled one for all into his legs, the green lightning that was his signature crackling around him. The power felt jittery, unstable, but it answered his call. He shot out of the alley, a green blur moving against the current of fleeing civilians. "Is everyone okay?" he shouted, his English clumsy with adrenaline. "Get to safety. Are there any heroes on the scene?" He skidded to a halt near the source of the explosion. The front of a pristine, opulent bank had been blown open, but it wasn't a man with a gigantification quirk, or some monster born of destructive impulse standing there. Hovering in the air were dozens of metallic, skull-faced drones. They had 3 glowing red optics that swiveled with cold, insect-like intelligence, and their spindly limbs ended in energy cannons that were already charging for another volley. Before Izuku could even formulate a plan, target the limbs. Aim for the central optic? What are their armor specs? A streak of brilliant red lightning zipped past him, so fast it was little more than a whisper of displaced air. The gust it left behind buffeted him. One of the drones, aimed at a cowering family, was suddenly dismantled, its pieces clattering to the pavement in a neat pile. The red streak was already gone, moving to another target. Izuku stared, dumbfounded. That speed, it's faster than Gran Torino. Faster than Ida with Recipro Turbo. The air pressure alone, is that his quirk? Then, a new sound. A deep, resonant hum. A man in a green and black uniform descended from the clouds, bathed in an emerald aura. A ring on his finger glowed with impossible intensity. As the drones fired, he didn't dodge. He threw up a hand, and a wall of translucent green energy, shaped like a massive, intricate shield, materialized from thin air, absorbing the blasts without a flicker. With a flick of his wrist, the shield dissolved and reshaped into a swarm of giant green fists that hammered into the drones, crushing them like tin cans. Izuku's jaw went slack. He's creating solid objects? From light? The versatility, the energy projection, that's not one quirk, that's a dozen. How is that possible? The ground shook. A woman of breathtaking grace and power landed with the force of a small meteor, cracking the pavement. She wore armor that seemed to be forged from myth itself, red, blue, and gold. In one hand she wielded a glowing golden lasso. She moved with the fluid lethality of a dancer, and the unyielding force of a mountain. The lasso was a blur, ensnaring 3 drones at once. With a single, powerful heave, she smashed them into each other, reducing them to scrap. She was regal, fierce, and her presence radiated an ancient, unyielding authority, strength, speed, and that lasso seems to have a will of its own. She's like a battle goddess. Her power feels ancient. Not like a quirk at all. From the shadows of the surrounding buildings, something dark and fluid detached itself. A figure cloaked in black and gray, a cape like a living creature of the night billowing behind him. He moved without a sound, a phantom against the urban chaos. He threw something, and a drone was suddenly ensnared in a high-tensile cable. He reeled himself towards it, and with a brutal efficiency that spoke of thousands of hours of training, planted an explosive device on its chassis. He swung away just as it detonated, already moving to the next target. Izuku's analytical mind, his greatest asset, was completely and utterly overwhelmed. No powers. I can't sense any power from him. It's all technology. Gadgets. And his movements, the precision, the martial arts, he's fighting these things with pure skill and strategy. He's like Aizawa-sensei, but with a budget that could fund a small country. This was a team. A well-oiled machine of impossible power and skill. They moved with an unspoken synergy that made even the pro-hero teams he'd idolized look like amateurs. They were containing the threat, protecting civilians, and dismantling the enemy with a level of efficiency that was both beautiful and terrifying. And then, he arrived. There was no grand entrance, no shout. The world just seemed to bend around his presence. A figure descended from the sky, hovering effortlessly against the gray clouds. He wore a suit of brilliant blue, a red cape that flowed behind him like a river of blood, and on his chest, a symbol. A stylized S and a shield of red and yellow. It was a symbol Izuku had never seen before, yet it felt instantly, iconically heroic. One of the largest drones, a command unit, fired a beam of concentrated crimson energy directly at him. The man didn't even flinch. He simply floated there as the beam, powerful enough to have likely leveled the entire block, washed over him, parting around his body as if hitting an immovable stone in a raging river. He raised a hand, not in aggression, but with a calm, almost gentle motion. Then, from his eyes, lanced two beams of focused, intense heat. They weren't explosive. They were surgical. They sliced through the command drone's armor plating with the ease of a hot knife through butter, melting its core. The drone went limp and fell from the sky with a dull thud. The man in blue then flew down, landing softly in front of the bank. He ripped the reinforced titanium vault door from its hinges as if it were cardboard and pulled out a family of 4 who had been trapped. Inside, his voice a calm, reassuring baritone that cut through the chaos. Izuku Midoriya stood frozen on the street corner, forgotten in the mayhem. His mind had stopped analyzing. His hero notebook, which he instinctively reached for, remained in its pouch. How could he even begin to describe this? How could he write down a power level for a man who could withstand that kind of energy? Who could fly without propulsion? Who could melt steel with a look? He had spent his entire life studying heroes, idolizing All Might, the symbol of peace, the man who seemed to be the pinnacle of what a hero could be. All Might was his god, but the man in the blue suit, he wasn't just a symbol. He felt like a fundamental law of physics. He was hope given form, stronger than All Might in his prime, faster than anyone Izuku had ever seen, and seemingly, completely and utterly invulnerable. These people, they weren't just heroes. They were giants. And in their presence, Izuku Midoriya, wielder of One for All, the sacred torch passed down through generations, felt crushingly, horrifyingly small. The battle was over in less than 5 minutes. The remaining drones were dispatched with contemptuous ease. The man in red, the Flash as Izuku would later learn his name was, had already evacuated all civilians from the immediate 2-block radius. The Green Lantern was creating energy constructs to support the damaged building facade, preventing a collapse. The Dark Knight, Batman, was already gathering data from a downed drone, his movements sharp and purposeful. The Warrior Princess, Wonder Woman, was speaking gently to the family that had been rescued, her powerful presence now a source of comfort. And the man in blue, Superman, floated in the center of it all, a beacon of calm and control. Izuku knew he had to do something. He couldn't just stand here. These were the heroes of this world. If anyone could help him, if anyone could understand, it was them. The hope that had been flickering in his chest, so close to being extinguished by fear and awe, now roared back to life. This was it. This was his chance. He took a deep breath, trying to still the tremor in his hands, and stepped forward, stumbling slightly over a piece of rubble. He raised a hand, his voice cracking with a mixture of desperation and reverence. "Excuse me." 6 pairs of superhuman eyes snapped towards him. The intensity of their collective gaze was a physical force. For a moment he felt like a mouse that had squeaked in a room full of lions. The Flash was beside him in an instant, a concerned, youthful face looking him over. "Whoa there, kid. You should have cleared out with the others. You hurt?" I'm okay," Izuku stammered, his eyes darting between the assembled heroes. They were even more impressive up close. Taller, more imposing. Gods descended to walk the earth. "I'm a hero. In training. My name is Deku. I was fighting a villain, and his quirk, there was a light, an eye." He fumbled for his provisional hero license, the laminated card a flimsy, pathetic piece of plastic from another reality. "See? I'm from Yue High School in Japan." He held it out. The Flash took it, looking at it with a frown of confusion. "Yue? Quirk? Kid, I don't know what any of that means." Superman floated down to land in front of him, his feet barely making a sound on the pavement. His expression was kind, his blue eyes filled with a genuine concern that reminded Izuku so much of All Might it made his heart ache. "Easy, son," Superman said, his voice calm and steady. "Just slow down. You're saying you're not from around here?" "No. I mean, yes. I'm not," Izuku said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "My world, we have these powers. We call them quirks. Almost everyone has one. We have schools like Yue, To train us to be pro-heroes, to save people. Like you all just did. That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen. Your speed, he glanced at the flash, it defies conventional physics. And your energy constructs, he looked to Green Lantern, the tensile strength must be off the charts. And your invulnerability, his gaze landed back on Superman, full of undisguised awe, is it cellular regeneration? A bioelectric field? How do you? He cut himself off, realizing he was rambling, his Fanba analysis spilling out uncontrollably. A blush crept up his neck. Sorry. I do that. Wonder Woman stepped forward, her expression unreadable. She was studying him not as a threat, but as a curiosity, an anomaly. There is a great power inside you, boy, she said, her voice melodic but carrying an edge of caution. It feels agitated. Unrestrained. Izuku looked down at his hands. Even now, faint green sparks danced between his knuckles. It's my quirk. It's called One for All. It's a stockpiling power. It's been passed down. That revelation hung in the air, creating a sudden tension. From the shadows, Batman emerged, his presence a palpable drop in temperature. His eyes, visible through the white lenses of his cowl, were narrowed, analytical, and utterly devoid of warmth. He didn't look at Izuku as a lost boy. He looked at him as a problem to be solved, a variable to be contained, a stockpiling power source of unknown origin. Batman's voice was a low, gravelly rasp, appearing in the middle of a Brainiac drone attack. Your energy signature flared moments before you revealed yourself. It's congruent with a massive dimensional transfer. A silent communication seemed to pass between the heroes. Izuku saw Superman's jaw tighten slightly. He felt a new presence in his mind, gentle but firm, like a soft knock on a door. His mind is a whirlwind, Clark, a voice echoed in the heads of the Leaguers. It was the Martian Manhunter, John Johns, who had been observing from a phased state. His thoughts are not deceptive, but they are chaotic. He is telling the truth as he knows it. But the power he holds, I can feel other presences linked to it. Faint echoes of others. It is a chorus of souls bound to a singular energy. I have never encountered anything like it. Batman's gaze hardened. We can't leave him here. Izuku's heart sank. He thought they would send him away. That they saw him as a nuisance. Please, he said, his voice pleading now. I don't know where I am. I don't know how to get home. You're heroes. You can help me, can't you? Superman put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. The sheer physical presence of the man was staggering. It was like being touched by a living monument. We're not going to leave you, son, Superman said, and the genuine kindness in his voice was a balm on Izuku's frayed nerves. But Batman is right. We can't just leave you to wander around a city, a world you don't know. Especially with a power you yourself admit is a lot to handle. He looked at the others, a silent consensus being reached. Batman gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Wonder Woman's wary expression softened into one of cautious acceptance. We want to help you, Superman continued, his focus entirely on Izuku. We have a place with advanced medical facilities, technology that might be able to scan for the dimensional frequency that brought you here. We can figure out what happened. And we can make sure you're okay. He offered a small, hopeful smile. You need to come with us. To the Watchtower. The Watchtower. The name itself sounded magnificent. A place where these giants gathered. A fortress of heroism in the sky. It wasn't a rejection. It was an invitation. They were going to help him. They were going to take him in, study his predicament, and help him get home. He would get to see their base, learn from them, be in the presence of the greatest heroes he could possibly imagine. The fear, the disorientation, the pain, it all melted away, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated euphoria. This was it. This was his you can become a hero moment, but on a scale he had never dreamed of. He had fallen into a world of gods, and they were extending a hand. He looked up at Superman, his eyes shining with unshed tears of relief and joy. He nodded vigorously, unable to form a coherent sentence. Okay, he finally managed to breathe out. Yes. Thank you? Thank you so much. No need for thanks, kid, the Flash said, giving him a friendly grin. It's what we do. Batman gestured towards a clear spot on the street. John, prepare the Zeta tube for 7. Acknowledged, Batman. A voice seemed to reply from the air itself. A column of shimmering light bathed them. Izuku felt a strange, tingling sensation, like his entire body was dissolving into harmless static. He looked up at Superman, who gave him a reassuring nod. The world dissolved into a blinding stream of light and data. For a fraction of a second, he was everywhere and nowhere. Then, just as quickly, the light faded, and he was reformed. The first thing he registered was the view. He was standing on a metal platform in a vast, circular room. But one entire wall was a window that looked out not at a city, but at the marble blue and white sphere of the earth, hanging like a divine jewel in the infinite, stardusted blackness of space. He was in orbit. He stumbled forward, drawn by the majestic sight, his hands pressing against the thick, transparent material of the window. Below him, continents drifted by, shrouded in swirling clouds. He could see the curve of the planet, the thin, brilliant blue line of the atmosphere. It was the most beautiful, humbling thing he had ever seen. He turned back to look at the room. It was the hub of a massive space station. Consoles blinked with data, technicians in uniforms moved with quiet efficiency, and in the center of it all stood the 6 heroes who had brought him here, their silhouettes framed against the backdrop of the planet they protected, the Watchtower. A fortress of heroes, floating among the stars. Izuku Midoriya, the boy who was once quirkless, the kid who was told he could never be a hero, stood in the headquarters of the gods of this new world. He was scared and lost and a million light years from home, but in that moment, all he could feel was hope. A bright, shining, and tragically naive hope. He was surrounded by heroes. He was safe. They were going to help him. He had no idea that he hadn't been brought here for sanctuary. He had been brought for judgment, and in the cold, logical calculus of gods, a variable as powerful and as unstable as Izuku Midoriya was not a boy to be saved, but a threat to be neutralized. His trial was about to begin, and he was smiling, completely unaware that he was about to be found guilty. The transition from the chaos of a metropolis street to the silent majesty of orbit was a sensory shock that left Izuku Midoriya breathless. One moment, he was grounded, surrounded by the scent of ozone and shattered concrete. The next, he was weightless, adrift in a cathedral of advanced technology, with the cradle of humanity itself turning silently outside the window. Incredible, he whispered, his voice barely audible in the cavernous observation deck. His face was pressed so close to the viewport that his breath fogged a small patch of the transparent aluminum. He could see the sun glinting off the Pacific Ocean, a vast expanse of sapphire blue. He felt a profound, humbling smallness, not the crushing kind he'd felt in the face of their power, but a serene, awe-inspiring one. He was a speck of dust looking upon a masterpiece. The view takes some getting used to. Superman's voice, warm and resonant, came from behind him. Izuku turned, his eyes wide and shining. The man of steel stood with his arms crossed, a gentle smile on his face. The iconic S on his chest seemed to soak up the ambient light of the station. We find it helps with perspective. Perspective, Izuku repeated, his mind racing. He means a global perspective. Not just a city, or a country. They watch over everything. All at once. The logistics, the energy requirements for a station this size, it must be self-sustaining. Solar, obviously, but there must be a primary core. Is it fusion? A contained singularity? And the life support systems for this many people. Come on, space case, tours this way. The flash zipped past, a blur of red that ruffled Izuku's already messy hair. Unless you want to stare at your home planet all day. Which, fair. Izuku flushed, pulling himself away from the window. Right. Sorry, what followed was a dream. He walked the halls of the Watchtower, a star-struck student in the hallowed halls of the gods. Superman acted as his primary guide, his calm presence a steady anchor in the overwhelming new environment. Izuku saw things that made the support labs at Yui look like a high school chemistry set. He saw a hangar bay holding spacecraft of a dozen different alien designs, a training room that could simulate any environment in the known galaxy, and a communications hub that was intercepting signals from light years away. He met other members. A man with magnificent hawk-like wings, who introduced himself as Hawkman, regarded him with the stern eye of an ancient warrior. A woman in green, Black Canary, gave him a sharp but not unkind nod, her gaze analytical. Every person he passed radiated a quiet, formidable competence. These weren't just people with powers. They were the absolute elite, the best of the best. His mind was a whirlwind of frantic, joyous analysis. He wanted to sketch everything, to write down every observation. The metallurgy of the station's hull, the design of the Flash's friction-proof boots, the faint energy signature of Wonder Woman's bracelets. It was a treasure trove of heroic data beyond his wildest dreams. He felt a desperate urge to ask for a notebook and a pen. His hopes solidified with every step. These people, this place, this was the pinnacle of heroism. They had to have the technology and knowledge to understand what had happened to him, to pinpoint the dimensional frequency, and send him back. He would be home soon. Maybe he could even bring back some of what he'd learned to help his friends, to help All Might. The tour eventually ended in a section of the station that was stark white and smelled of antiseptic, the medical and science wing. The friendly, awe-inspiring atmosphere subtly shifted. The casual warmth was replaced by a clinical focus. "In here, Izuku," Superman said, his tone still kind but now tinged with a more serious edge. He had started using Izuku's given name, a small gesture that had made the boy's heart swell. The room they entered was dominated by a large, circular platform surrounded by an array of gleaming silver pylons and floating sensor arrays. It looked less like a doctor's office and more like a particle accelerator. Martian Manhunter, John Johns, floated silently in the center of the room, his red eyes thoughtful. Batman was already at a console, his fingers flying across a holographic interface, bringing up complex energy schematics. "If you'll stand on the platform, we need to run a full diagnostic," Batman said, not looking up. His voice was flat, all business. "We need to understand the nature of your power and the interdimensional energy residue attached to your cellular structure." Izuku's budding excitement faltered, replaced by a familiar prickle of anxiety. This felt less like a checkup and more like an inspection. Still, he trusted them. He trusted Superman. He walked to the center of the platform, standing awkwardly as the pylons around him began to hum with a low, building energy. "This won't hurt," Superman reassured him. "It's just a scan." A faint, shimmering field of blue light enveloped him. Izuku felt a strange tingling sensation, as if his very atoms were being catalogued. On the main screen, a complex biological wireframe of his body appeared, along with streams of data that flowed too quickly for him to read. But one part of the display pulsed with a violent, chaotic light, a supernova of emerald green, centered in his chest, with crackling tendrils reaching through every part of his body. "One for all." "By Rao," Superman murmured, his eyes fixed on the screen. The sheer energy readings were astronomical. Wonder Woman stared at the pulsing green light, her brow furrowed. "It's not a metagene. It's grafted onto his biology. A foreign energy source that has been accepted by his cells. And it's growing," Batman stated, his voice grim. "The energy output is not static. Our projections showed the potential for logarithmic growth. There's no theoretical upper limit. No upper limit." The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. John Johns floated closer to Izuku, his cape drifting around him. "May I?" he asked, his voice a gentle psychic whisper in Izuku's mind as well as a spoken word in the room. "I must understand its nature. The echoes I felt before. I must see them more clearly." Izuku, unnerved but wanting to be cooperative, nodded hesitantly. "Oh, okay." John's eyes glowed a soft red. The world around Izuku dissolved. He was no longer in the medical bay. He was adrift in a sea of pure, green energy. Before him, he saw them, the vestiges. But they were clearer than he had ever seen them before, their forms distinct, their faces etched with concern. He saw the stern visage of Lariat, the kind eyes of Nana Shimura, the weary face of All Might's predecessor. They reached out to him, their silent voices a chorus of warning and worry. And then he felt another presence among them, John. The Martian was a silent observer, his psychic form a point of calm red light and the swirling green storm. Such history, John's telepathic voice resonated through the space. Such sacrifice. It is a legacy. A torch passed through generations, each one adding their own soul, their own power, to the flame. It is a living history of heroism. The connection was severed as quickly as it began. Izuku stumbled, gasping, back in the medical bay. John had recoiled, his hand pressed to his temple, his expression one of profound shock. "John?" Wonder Woman asked, taking a step toward him. "What did you see?" "A ghost," John said, his voice strained. "No, a multitude. The power is sentient. It houses the conscious imprints of its previous wielders. He is not just carrying a power, he is carrying a lineage of souls within him." The room fell silent. Izuku looked at their faces, and for the first time, he didn't see awe or kindness. He saw fear. Cold, professional, deeply ingrained fear. They weren't looking at a lost boy anymore. They were looking at a living ghost bomb. Batman's interrogation began then. It wasn't framed as such, of course. It was an assessment of his psychological state. But Izuku knew what it was. It felt like standing before Aizawa-sensei on the first day, his entire future hanging in the balance. "You said your body can't handle the full output of this power," Batman began, his voice leaving no room for evasion. "You break your bones." "Ah, yes." "At higher percentages," Izuku admitted, shrinking under the intensity of his gaze. "But I'm getting better at it. My body is adapting. I can use 8% consistently now, and up to 20% in short bursts. And what happens if you're in a situation where you are forced to go beyond that? In a moment of emotional distress?" Batman pressed. I try not to. I have to be careful. You're a teenager." "Emotional distress is your default state," Batman stated, not as an insult, but as a cold, hard fact. "You spoke of a symbol of peace. This All Might. You said you have to be the next one." "Yes. He chose me. He gave me one for all. It's my duty to live up to his legacy. To be a hero everyone can count on, who saves everyone with a smile." Izuku's voice was filled with a desperate earnestness, trying to make them understand the sanctity of his mission. He was failing. He could see it in their eyes. His passion, his drive, his very reason for being a hero, was being twisted in their perception. To them, it wasn't noble. It was a messiah complex, a dangerous level of pressure placed on an unstable power source housed in an emotional child. "So you feel the weight of the entire world on your shoulders," Wonder Woman said softly, though her words were not entirely gentle. "That is a heavy burden, little one. It can make a person do things they would not otherwise do. It can make them justify any action in the name of the greater good." "I would never." Izuku started, but Batman cut him off. "You would. You already have," he said, pulling up a new file on the screen. It was an analysis of the energy from the dimensional tear. "The villain you were fighting was manipulating space-time. According to our readings, your power output spiked to a level that should have been physically impossible for your body to contain. You overloaded his quirk, as you call it, and in doing so, you ripped a hole between our realities. It was an uncontrolled, desperate act." Izuku stared, horrified. It was true. He had pushed himself, gone beyond his limit in a moment of panic to save his friends. He had won the fight, but he had lost himself in the process. He had done exactly what they were afraid of. "The tests are complete," Batman announced, turning off the console. The blue containment field around Izuku dissipated. "Thank you for your cooperation. Please wait in the adjoining observation room. We need to discuss our findings." Superman placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. "It's going to be all right, son. We just need to talk things through." His words, meant to be reassuring, now felt hollow, patronizing. Izuku numbly allowed himself to be led to a smaller, comfortable room with another large viewport looking out at the earth. A door slid shut behind him, leaving him alone with his reflection in the glass and the vast, silent planet below. The awe he had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He had been weighed. He had been measured. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that he had been found wanting. Inside the main lab, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The 6 founding members of the Justice League stood in a circle, their faces grim. "The boy cannot stay here," Batman said, his voice absolute. He began to pace, a caged predator in his own domain. The power he wields, one for all, is arguably one of the most dangerous weapons we have ever encountered. It has no discernible limit, its growth is exponential, and it is tied to the emotional state of a child who believes he has a messianic duty to save everyone. He's not a weapon, Bruce. He's a lost kid, Superman countered, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, a sign of his deep frustration. John, you felt it. The power is a legacy of heroism. Its intent is noble. Intent is not the issue, Clark, Wonder Woman interjected, her voice measured but firm. The road to ruin is often paved with noble intentions. I have seen it 1,000 times among men. He has the heart of a hero, yes. But that heart is young and volatile. He is driven by a deep-seated insecurity and a desperate need for validation. In a moment of crisis, he will sacrifice his own well-being, his own control, for the sake of others. He admitted as much. What happens when that sacrifice unleashes an energy surge that cracks a continent? We can teach him, Flash said, speaking up for the first time. We can help him control it. Star Labs could build a regulator, something too. You can't regulate an earthquake. Batman cut him off sharply. We are dealing with a force of nature crammed inside a human body. A body from a different reality, with different fundamental physics. We don't know how his power will interact with our world in the long term. We don't know if its very presence is destabilizing our reality. The dimensional tear he created was not small. He is a walking, talking paradox, a variable we cannot afford. Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, finally spoke, his arms crossed. I'm with Bruce on this. My ring is telling me the energy that thing puts out is off the charts. It's like a contained Big Bang. We're the Justice League. Our first duty is to protect this Earth. We can't be sentimental when the stakes are this high. So what are you suggesting, Bruce? Superman demanded, his voice dangerously low. We lock him up? We throw a scared child in a cell? We contain him, Batman corrected, his tone unyielding. Humanely. Securely. In a facility where he cannot hurt himself or anyone else. We dedicate our resources to finding a way to send him back to his own dimension. It is the only logical, responsible course of action. It protects our world, and it protects him from his own power. It's a prison, Bruce. Don't dress it up in your cold logic, Superman shot back, taking a step forward. We told him we would help him. Is this what our help looks like? A cage? Our help is ensuring that he doesn't become a mass casualty event. Batman retorted, his voice rising to a controlled roar. He has the power to shatter planets and the emotional maturity of a high school student. He is not your responsibility, Clark. This world is. A heavy silence descended. The two pillars of the Justice League, hope and pragmatism, stood at an impasse. It was Wonder Woman who broke it. She placed a hand on Clark's arm, her expression etched with a deep, regal sorrow. Clark, listen to me. As a warrior, I see the potential in the boy. As a princess of Themyscira, I see a child who is lost and afraid. But as a guardian of this world, I cannot ignore the danger. Bruce's logic is sound. Cold but sound. We cannot risk our world on a hope that he can be controlled. We must be certain. Containment, until we can ensure his safe return, is the most compassionate and the most responsible choice. It is a terrible choice, but it is the one we must make. Superman looked at her, then at the others. He saw the grim agreement in Hal's eyes, the reluctant nod from Flash, the silent, stoic concurrence from John. He was outvoted. The hope he represented had been overruled by fear. He let out a long, slow breath, the fight seeming to drain out of him. He looked toward the door behind which Izuku waited, his heart heavy with the betrayal he was about to deliver. I will be the one to tell him, Superman said, his voice flat with defeat. Izuku was tracing the outline of South America on the viewport when the door slid open. Superman entered alone. The gentle smile he had worn earlier was gone, replaced by a mask of pained solemnity. Izuku's stomach plummeted. He knew. Izuku, Superman began, his voice heavy. We have finished our discussion. Izuku just stood there, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his knuckles white. He didn't speak. He just waited for the axe to fall. Your power, one for all, It's more powerful and more unstable than we could have imagined, Superman said, struggling to find the right words. You are not from this reality. Your biology, the very energy you command, is an unknown. A catastrophic unknown. I can control it, Izuku said, his voice a tight whisper. I swear I can learn. Just give me a chance. That's all I've ever wanted. A chance. We can't give you that chance, Superman said, and the words were like a physical blow. The risk is too great. A single, uncontrolled outburst could endanger millions of lives. We cannot allow you to operate freely. We can't train you. We are not equipped to handle a power like yours. Izuku's world, which had been so full of hope just an hour ago, tilted on its axis. So, what then? He asked, his voice trembling. Are you just going to send me away? We are going to find a way to send you home, Superman said, trying to sound reassuring. Our best minds will work on it. But until then, for your safety, and for the safety of everyone on this planet, we have to keep you contained. Contained. The word echoed in the silent room. It was a sterile, clinical word. A word used for hazardous materials, for wild animals, for weapons. You mean a prison? Izuku choked out, the tears he had been holding back finally beginning to well in his eyes. It's a secure facility, Superman corrected gently, but the correction was meaningless. You'll be comfortable. You'll be safe. Safe. Comfortable. A prisoner. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it stole the air from his lungs. They had brought him here with promises of help, of hope. They had shown him the heavens, only to lock him in a cage. They saw his dream, his entire reason for living, and they had labeled it a threat. All his life, he had been told he was not enough. Quirkless. A weakling. A Deku. He had fought and bled and broken his own body to prove them wrong. Now, he was standing before the greatest heroes in existence, and they were telling him something far more cruel. It wasn't that he wasn't enough. It was that he was too much. His power, his legacy, his dream, it was a disease. A bomb to be defused. A monster to be caged. You're no different, he whispered, his voice trembling with a rage born of pure, shattered heartbreak. You're no different from everyone else. Izuku, please understand. No! He screamed, the sound tearing from his throat. The windows of the observation room rattled. The lights flickered. A wave of raw, uncontrolled power exploded from him, green lightning not just crackling around him but lashing out, charring the walls. One for all, feeling his despair, his rage, his sense of ultimate betrayal, surged to the surface. It was no longer the controlled 8% or the struggling 20%. This was a raw, emotional eruption, a full cowling of pure agony. Superman was thrown back by the sheer force of the energy wave, his cape billowing as he slid across the floor. Alarms blared through the watchtower, klaxons screaming a high-pitched warning, metahuman power surge in Sector Gamma. Containment protocols engaged. The door to the room slid open, and the rest of the League was there. Batman already had a batarang in hand. Wonder Woman's lasso was glowing, Green Lantern's ring was blazing. They saw him not as a boy in pain, but as the threat they had predicted he would be. Their caution was now justified, and that was the final, most bitter irony. By treating him like a monster, they had made him one. His analytical mind, sharpened by years of combat, took over even through the haze of his rage. He saw their stances, calculated their trajectories. He saw the emergency Zeta Tube teleporter at the far end of the corridor, the one used for rapid, non-scheduled departures. It was his only way out. He didn't think. He moved. With a scream that was half sob, half war cry, he pushed off the floor. The deck plating beneath his feet buckled. He was a green missile of grief and power. Stop him! Batman yelled. Flash moved to intercept, a red streak cutting him off. But Izuku, fueled by this unprecedented surge of One for All, was faster than Flash anticipated. Izuku didn't try to outrun him. He changed vectors in midair, slamming his foot into the wall and ricocheting in another direction, a perfect imitation of Gran Torino's technique. Green Lantern threw up a wall of green energy. Izuku didn't try to break it. He punched the floor, the force of a 45% Delaware smash shattering the reinforced plating, creating a cloud of debris and shrapnel that obscured Lantern's vision for a split second. It was all the time he needed. He burst through the cloud, heading straight for the teleporter. Wonder Woman threw her lasso. The golden light shot towards him, but he spun, using the momentum, and the lasso snared a support pillar instead of him. He was almost there. The Zetatube console was 10 feet away. Superman was back on his feet, blurring toward him. He wouldn't make it. No. I won't be a prisoner. I won't be a specimen. He poured more power into his legs, feeling the terrifying, familiar agony as his own muscles began to tear under the strain. He was a blur of green lightning. He slammed his hand down on the teleporter's activation panel, not bothering to input coordinates, just hitting the emergency transit button. Kid, don't! Superman yelled, his hand outstretched, just inches from his shoulder. But it was too late. The world dissolved into a chaotic vortex of light and sound. The Zetatube, not designed for random, uncalibrated jumps, screamed in protest. Izuku felt his body being pulled apart again, but this time it was violent, jagged, wrong. He caught a glimpse of a final data stream on the console before it all went white. Destination, Gotham City. Batcave Subtransit Relay 7. Then, only darkness. He was falling, tumbling through a void. The power surge receded, leaving behind an ocean of pain. His bones ached, his muscles screamed, and his heart was a shattered ruin. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the last of the air from his lungs. He was in another alley, but this one was different from the one in Metropolis. It was darker. Grittier. The air was thick with the smell of decay and damp rot. A cold, relentless rain was falling, plastering his torn costume to his skin. He pushed himself onto his hands and knees, coughing, the rainwater mingling with the tears streaming down his face. He looked up at the sky, at the oppressive, light-polluted clouds that hid the stars, that hid the watchtower. They were up there. The gods who had judged him. The heroes who had betrayed him. He had never felt so powerful. And he had never felt so utterly, completely alone. The pain was a living thing. It coiled in Izuku's muscles, a white-hot serpent of agony that radiated from his overstrained limbs. Every breath was a shard of glass in his lungs. The adrenaline from the escape had evaporated, leaving behind a chilling cocktail of exhaustion, despair, and the deep, throbbing ache of torn ligaments and microfractures. He was a puppet with his strings cut, crumpled in a heap on the grimy, rain-slicked asphalt of a Gotham City alley. This alley was nothing like the one in Metropolis. That one had been a mere gap between titans of gleaming steel. This was a wound in the city's flesh. The brick walls were slick with grime and moss, weeping a foul-smelling black ooze. A single, flickering fluorescent light high above cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and crawl. The stench was a physical presence, a miasma of decay, stale beer, and the cloying, metallic scent of old blood. It was a place where hope came to die. Izuku felt a grim kinship with it. He pushed himself up, hissing as his shoulder screamed in protest. The gamma suit, his pride and joy, was a wreck, torn, filthy, and offering little protection from the cold, relentless drizzle that soaked him to the bone. The rain was a miserable, gray sheet, blurring the edges of a city that already seemed designed to be as sharp and hostile as possible. He stumbled out of the alley's mouth, leaning against the cold brick for support. Gotham. The name echoed in his memory from the Zetatube console. This was Batman's city. Looking around, he could see why the Dark Knight was the way he was. Musitifa had its dark corners, its crime-ridden districts, but this was different. This was systemic decay. The architecture was a Gothic nightmare, all sharp angles and grotesque gargoyles that seemed to leer down at the streets below. Every shadow felt predatory. The people who hurried through the rain had a hunched, weary look to them, their faces pale and drawn under the sickly yellow glow of the streetlights. There was no joy here, only a grim, dogged persistence. His stomach twisted with a hunger that was more than just a lack of food. It was a hollow, aching void where his hope used to be. The betrayal was a fresh, raw wound. He replayed the scene in the watchtower over and over in his mind. The clinical fear in their eyes. The cold, pragmatic dismissal of his entire being. Superman's pained, pitying expression as he delivered the verdict. For your safety, and for the safety of everyone on this planet. It was a lie. A pretty lie to cover a simple, ugly truth. They were afraid of him. Afraid of what he was, of what he could become. They saw his power not as a tool for salvation, but as a sword of Damocles hanging over their perfect, ordered world. They were gods on a mountain, and he was an unpredictable volcano threatening to erupt at its base. So they had decided to cap him. To contain him. To cage him. A wave of nausea and dizziness washed over him. He pressed his back harder against the wall, sliding down to sit on the wet pavement, careless of the cold that seeped into him. His head throbbed, a brutal, pulsing rhythm that matched the beat of the rain. The unstable jump, the power surge, he was running on empty. He was alone. Utterly and completely alone. In a world that wasn't his, hunted by its greatest protectors, with a power that was actively trying to tear his body apart. A sob, raw and ragged, escaped his lips. He buried his face in his knees, the thin fabric of his costume rough against his cheek. The tears came then, hot and silent, mingling with the cold Gotham rain. He cried for his mom, for All Might, for Uraraka and Ida and the life that had been stolen from him. He cried for the hero he had so desperately wanted to be, a dream that now lay shattered in the filth of this unforgiving city. How long he sat there, a miserable, shivering bundle of green and black, he didn't know. The city's cacophony was a distant roar, the rain a constant, mournful drone. He was so lost in his own despair that he didn't notice the sleek, black limousine that had pulled to a silent stop at the curb a few feet away. He didn't notice the rear door opening. He didn't notice the polished, black leather shoes that stepped onto the pavement, their shine undulled by the rain. He only looked up when a shadow fell over him, blocking the sickly streetlight. A tall, impeccably dressed man stood before him, holding a large black umbrella that shielded them both from the downpour. The man was older, with a clean-shaven, patrician face that was all sharp angles and cold intelligence. His eyes, a pale, piercing blue, held an unnerving intensity, like a surgeon examining a fascinating new specimen. He wore a suit so perfectly tailored it seemed less like clothing and more like a second skin, a dark gray that absorbed the light. There was an aura of immense, predatory power about him, but it wasn't physical. It was the power of intellect, of wealth, of absolute, unshakable confidence. Izuku flinched back, trying to push himself further against the wall. His mind screamed villain. This was the kind of person who moved in the shadows, who manipulated events from a high tower. Was this one of Batman's rogues? The Joker? Penguin? No, this man was too clean, too corporate. The man didn't move, his expression unreadable. He simply held the umbrella, creating a small, dry oasis in the middle of the storm. Izuku Midoriya, the man said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and resonated with quiet authority. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Izuku's blood ran cold. How do you know my name? He stammered, his hand instinctively moving to his side, as if to find a weapon that wasn't there. I know a great many things, the man replied, a faint, humorless smile touching his lips. I know that you appeared in Metropolis this morning. I know that you were taken to the Justice League's orbiting watchtower. And I know that you made a rather dramatic exit approximately 37 minutes ago. My tracking systems flagged the energy signature of your arrival. It was quite distinct. Izuku stared at him, his tired mind struggling to process the information. This man had been tracking him? Since Metropolis? Who are you? Izuku demanded, trying to inject a strength into his voice that he didn't feel. The man's smile widened slightly. It did not reach his eyes. My name is Lex Luthor. And I believe you, and I have a great deal to talk about. Lex Luthor. The name meant nothing to Izuku, but the man's presence was overwhelming. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to fight, to get away. But where would he go? What would he do? He was injured, starving, and heartbroken. He had nowhere else to turn. As if reading his thoughts, Luthor gestured with his free hand toward the open door of the limousine. You are cold, injured, and clearly in distress. I am offering you shelter, a warm meal, and an opportunity. The alternative is to remain here, waiting for Batman to inevitably find you and drag you back to the cage his so-called friends have prepared for you. The choice, of course, is yours. The words hung in the air between them. A cage. That's what it was. This stranger, this. Lex Luthor understood that. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't call it a secure facility. He called it what it was. Izuku looked from Luthor's piercing eyes to the inviting, warm glow of the limousine's interior. He saw his own pathetic reflection in the polished black door, a shivering, lost child. He thought of Superman's pity, of Batman's cold disdain, of the terror in Wonder Woman's eyes. Then he looked back at Luthor. He didn't see pity or fear. He saw interest. A clinical, calculating interest, but interest nonetheless. He was too tired to fight, too broken to run. With a groan of pain, he used the wall to push himself to his feet, swaying unsteadily. What do you want from me? For now? I want to offer a fellow victim of the Justice League's hypocrisy a measure of comfort, Luthor said smoothly. And perhaps a conversation. Nothing more. A fellow victim. The phrase resonated deep within Izuku's wounded soul. It was a lifeline of validation in an ocean of betrayal. Hesitantly, every muscle screaming in protest, he limped toward the car and slid into the plush leather seat. The interior was silent, insulated from the storm outside. The warmth was an almost painful blessing against his cold-soaked skin. Luthor folded his umbrella with a neat snap and got in after him, settling into the opposite seat. The door closed with a soft, heavy thud, sealing them in a world of quiet luxury. The car began to move, gliding through the rain-slicked Gotham streets with impossible smoothness. The penthouse apartment was an exercise in minimalist opulence. It occupied the entire top floor of a sleek, black skyscraper that towered over the rest of Gotham, a blade of obsidian piercing the polluted sky. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a sprawling tapestry of glittering lights and deep, dark chasms. The storm outside was a silent movie, lightning spiderwebbing across the clouds without a sound. Izuku stood awkwardly in the center of the vast living room, dripping onto a priceless-looking white rug. A hot shower, a set of simple, comfortable gray sweats, and a nutrient-rich protein bar that Luthor had provided had done wonders to chase away the immediate physical misery. The gnawing ache in his bones remained, a constant reminder of his power's toll, but the shivering had stopped, and the world was no longer spinning. He felt small and out of place in the sterile, magnificent space. It was the lair of a king, a fortress of wealth and power that rivaled the Watchtower in its own way. Lex Luthor stood by the window, a glass of dark amber liquid in his hand, swirling it gently. He had changed into a simple but elegant black turtleneck and trousers. He watched the city below, his back to Izuku. "Impressive, isn't it?" Luthor said, his voice a soft murmur. "A monument to humanity's ambition, and its depravity. From up here, you can almost believe it's beautiful, but we both know what crawls in the gutters." Izuku didn't answer. He was still wary, his mind a fortress of suspicion. This man had given him comfort, but he knew, with the certainty of a hero in training, that there was a price. Villains didn't do things for free. Luthor turned to face him, his pale eyes catching the light. "Tell me about them, Izuku. Tell me about your heroes." "They're not my heroes," Izuku spat, the words tasting like ash. "No, I suppose they're not," Luthor conceded with a slight nod. "They are ours. The gods of this modern Olympus, who descended from the sky to save us. Tell me what they did to you." The question was an invitation. A key turning in a lock he hadn't realized was there. And the story, the betrayal, the humiliation, poured out of him. He told Luthor everything. About his world, about quirks, about All Might and the sacred duty of one for all. He spoke of his awe upon seeing the Justice League, his hope when they took him to the Watchtower. His voice cracked as he described the cold, clinical assessment, the fear in their eyes when they saw his power. He recounted Superman's hollow words, the sentence of containment, and the desperate, frantic escape. He didn't hold back his pain, his confusion, his rage. He laid his shattered heart bare on the floor of that penthouse. Luthor listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer platitudes or false sympathy. He simply stood there, his gaze fixed on Izuku, absorbing every word, every nuance, every tremor of emotion. He was the most attentive audience Izuku had ever had. When Izuku finally fell silent, his throat raw, Luther took a slow sip of his drink. He let the silence stretch, giving Izuku's words weight. So, they judged you, Luther said at last, his voice soft but edged with steel. They saw a power they didn't understand, a power they couldn't control, and their immediate, instinctual response was to lock it in a box. Does that sound like heroism to you, Izuku? Or does it sound like fear? I don't know, Izuku whispered, looking at his hands. I do, Luther said, his voice dropping, becoming intimate, conspiratorial. It is the pinnacle of their hypocrisy. They call themselves saviors, but they are wardens. They fly above us, cloaked in righteousness, but they look down on humanity not with love, but with condescension. They don't want a partner. They don't want an equal. They want obedience. He began to pace slowly, his movements precise and deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. But Izuku didn't feel like prey. He felt seen. You, Izuku, are a threat to their entire worldview, Luther continued, his voice building in intensity. You are human. A boy. And yet you hold a power that could potentially rival their own. You represent humanity's potential to reach for the heavens on its own terms, without their alien guidance or divine permission. And that terrifies them. They can't have a human holding that kind of power, because if a human can become a god, then what do we need their gods for? Luther stopped in front of a massive, sleek black console that dominated one wall. With a few taps on its holographic surface, it came to life. Not with schematics or financial data, but with images, news reports, videos. Let me show you the truth they don't want you to see, Luther said. The first image was a city street devastated. A building was on fire. It was footage from Superman's first public battle with the Kryptonian General Zod. The scale of the destruction was immense, far beyond anything Izuku had seen in Japan. They called this the Battle of Metropolis, Luther explained, his voice a cold narration. Superman saved the city. But the official death toll was 129. The unofficial estimate is closer to 5,000. Thousands more were injured, hundreds of thousands displaced. He had the power to take that fight away from the city, into the desert, into space. But in his arrogance, in his rage, he fought among us. He used our home as his personal wrestling ring. And the world thanked him for it. The screen changed. It showed a map of the world, with dozens of red dots appearing. Every one of these dots represents a political crisis, an economic collapse, or a covert military action directly caused by the Justice League's intervention. They topple regimes they deem unjust, leaving power vacuums that are filled by warlords and terrorists. They cripple economies by destroying infrastructure in their flashy, thoughtless battles. They are not surgeons, Izuku. They are a sledgehammer, and they treat the entire world as a nail. Another video. Batman, a dark specter of violence, brutally taking down a group of thugs. Bones were broken, men were left crippled. It was efficient, yes, but it was savage. And then there's our local celebrity, Luther sneered. The Batman? He wages a one-man war on the symptoms of this city's disease, but never touches the cause. He beats the poor and the desperate into submission, then vanishes back to his ivory tower, or his cave, as it were. He instills fear. But what good is fear without hope? Without a path forward? Gotham is no better now than it was when he first put on that ridiculous costume. In fact, some might argue it's worse. He attracts a higher caliber of lunatic. He is a self-perpetuating problem. The final image was a collage of supervillains. The Joker. Brainiac. Darkseid. Doomsday. And what of their solutions? Luther asked, turning to face Izuku fully. They fight these world-ending threats, and where do they put them when they've won? In a revolving door prison like Arkham Asylum, or a high-tech facility from which they inevitably escape. They refuse to deliver permanent solutions. Why? Because if they solved the problems, truly fixed them, they would no longer be needed. Their entire identity is predicated on the existence of chaos. They don't want to cure the disease, Izuku. They just want to manage the symptoms. It guarantees them a job for life. He switched off the display. The room was silent again, save for the faint hum of the building's systems. Izuku stood, rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. Luther's words were a poison, but a seductive one. He was twisting the truth, Izuku knew that. He was showing only one side of the story, framing everything in the worst possible light. But there was a sliver of undeniable, terrifying logic in what he was saying. The collateral damage. The political instability. The refusal to end threats permanently. Izuku had seen it himself back home. Villains escaped from Tartarus. The Hero Public Safety Commission made morally gray decisions. The system wasn't perfect. Luther was taking that imperfection and magnifying it, weaponizing it. You see a problem, and you want to fix it, Luther said, his voice now calm, almost gentle. That is the heart of a true hero. Not just to punch the villain, but to save the people from the circumstances that created the villain in the first place. To build a better world, not just to police a broken one. That is what I want, too. He walked over to a small, hidden panel in the wall. It slid open to reveal a single object on a pedestal, bathed in a soft white light. It was a piece of glowing green rock, jagged and crystalline, pulsing with a faint, sickly energy. Kryptonite, Luther said, a note of reverence in his voice. A fragment of Superman's dead home world. A reminder that even gods can bleed. They are not invincible. They are not infallible. They are just a problem. And every problem has a solution. He closed the panel, turning his full attention back to Izuku. The intensity in his eyes was hypnotic. They cast you out because you represent a power they cannot control. I, on the other hand, I see that power as the very thing that can finally create real, lasting change. They saw a weapon to be locked away. I see a savior who has been betrayed. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. They want to put you in a cage, Izuku. I want to give you a world to save. Truly save. Not with smiles and platitudes, but with strength, with strategy, with an unwavering will to do what is necessary. The world doesn't need another symbol to make them feel safe. It needs a leader to make them safe. It needs an arbiter of true justice. Luther extended a hand. It was not the hand of a comforting hero like Superman's. It was the hand of a chess master, a kingmaker. It was a hand that offered not comfort, but power. An alliance. A purpose. Work with me, Izuku Midoriya, Lex Luthor said, his pale blue eyes gleaming with cold, brilliant fire. Let's give them a reason to be afraid. Let's show them what real power, guided by real conviction, can achieve. Let's fix this broken world together. Izuku stared at the outstretched hand. He thought of the cold dismissal in Batman's eyes. He thought of the fear and pity from the others. He thought of the cage they had waiting for him. They had left him with nothing. No hope, no allies, no way home. And here was this man, this devil in the details, offering him everything he now craved, validation, purpose, and revenge. He was offering him a new path. Not the path of a smiling symbol of peace, but the path of a righteous, avenging fury. The old Izuku, the boy who cried watching heroes on the computer, screamed in protest from a deep, forgotten corner of his soul. But his voice was drowned out by the roar of his own pain and the seductive, logical poison of Luther's words. Slowly, hesitantly, Izuku lifted his own hand. It was trembling. He looked at Lex Luthor's face, seeing the cold, triumphant certainty there. He knew this was a monumental choice, a step off a cliff from which he could never return. But the world of heroes had already pushed him over the edge. All Lex Luthor was doing was offering to teach him how to fly on the way down. His fingers brushed against Luthor's. And with a grim, terrible finality, he took his hand. The moment Izuku's trembling fingers made contact with Lex Luthor's steady hand, a profound and irreversible shift occurred in the cosmos of his soul. It wasn't a sudden cataclysm, but a quiet, tectonic realignment. The handshake was brief, the grip firm and dry, but it was a contract signed in despair, sealed with the ghost of a dead dream. When Luthor released him, Izuku's hand felt unnaturally cold, as if some essential warmth had been siphoned away. He stood in the center of the opulent penthouse, the city lights of Gotham glittering like a field of fallen, broken stars. The old Izuku Midoriya, the crying child who dreamed of saving everyone with a smile, was still there, screaming in a soundproofed room deep within him. But his voice was weak, drowned out by the roaring silence of betrayal. In his place, a new consciousness was taking root, nurtured by the fertile soil of his pain and watered by the poison of Luther's logic. It was a cold, pragmatic thing, born of necessity. It was the part of him that would survive. An excellent decision, Luther said, his voice smooth as polished marble. There was no gloating, no overt triumph. That would have been too simple, too villainous. Instead, there was only the quiet satisfaction of a grandmaster whose gambit had paid off exactly as predicted. The first step in any true revolution is the acceptance that the old ways have failed. He turned from Izuku and walked toward a panel in the wall. Rest is your first priority. Your body is in a state of extreme distress. Cellular degradation, severe muscle tearing, hairline fractures in your radius and ulna. Your quirk is a brutish, inefficient engine. We will refine it. But for now, you will sleep in a stable environment. The panel slid open to reveal not a bedroom, but a medical pod that looked like it had been lifted from a science fiction film. It was a gleaming white sarcophagus, its interior lined with soft, bioreactive gel. This will monitor your vitals, administer targeted nutrients, and aid your body's natural healing process, Luther explained. It will also dull the pain. Izuku looked at the pod, then back at Luther. This was his new reality. Not a dorm room at UA filled with the laughter of his friends, but a sterile, silent pod in a billionaire's sky-high fortress. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he felt a strange, hollow relief. He was tired. So deeply, fundamentally tired. To be free from the constant, agonizing thrum of his injuries, even for a few hours, was a siren's call he couldn't resist. He nodded numbly and stepped toward it. As the lid hissed shut, sealing him in the cool, silent darkness, his last conscious thought was not of All Might, but of Superman's face, etched with pity, and a cold resolve hardened within him. He would never be looked upon with pity again. The days that followed blurred into a regimented routine that was a stark, brutalist contrast to his life at UA. There were no friendly rivalries, no warm meals with friends, no encouraging words from beloved teachers. There was only Lex Luthor and the singular, all-consuming goal, the refinement of Izuku Midoriya into a weapon. The training began not in a gym, but in the gleaming, state-of-the-art research and development wing of LexCorp. It was a sprawling campus of scientific marvels, a place that made David Shield's island look like a quaint workshop. Luther gave him a personal tour, not to gloat, but to indoctrinate. He showed Izuku medical labs where his scientists were on the verge of curing neurodegenerative diseases, their progress annoyingly stymied, as Luther put it, by regulations the Wayne Foundation lobbied for. He showed him clean energy projects, vast arrays of solar collectors and experimental fusion cores, that could power the entire eastern seaboard, but were tangled in a web of red tape and public fear-mongering subtly encouraged by the Flash's friends at SDR Labs, who prefer the world remains dependent on their technology. Every marvel was presented with a caveat, a story of how the Justice League and their allies, directly or indirectly, stifled true human progress. They weren't just unaccountable gods. They were gatekeepers, preserving a status quo that kept humanity dependent and weak. They offer bandages for a dying world, Izuku, Luther said as they observed a team of geneticists. We are trying to cure the disease. Who, I ask you, is the greater hero? Izuku didn't answer, but the words sank deep, twisting his own heroic ideals. Saving people isn't enough. You have to fix the system that hurts them. It was a warped echo of his own deepest desires, and it was becoming his new mantra. After a week of healing and ideological immersion, the physical training began. Luther led him to a place deep in the sub-basements of LexCorp Tower, a facility he called the Crucible. It was a massive, circular chamber, its walls and floor composed of a shifting, programmable material that could replicate any environment. In the center of the room, Izuku stood, clad in a simple black training suit laced with a web of glowing green biosensors. Your method of using your power is sentimental, Luther stated from an observation deck high above, his voice echoing in the chamber. A massive holographic screen lit up beside him, displaying Izuku's real-time biometrics. You treat pain as a noble sacrifice. You break your body as a testament to your effort. This is foolishness. Pain is a signal. It is a data point indicating systemic failure. Nothing more. We are going to teach you to detach, to analyze, and to master. The chamber around Izuku shimmered and transformed. The smooth floor became broken concrete and twisted rebar. The walls became the dark, oppressive alleyways of Hosa's city. The air grew thick with the smell of blood and smoke. Izuku's heart hammered in his chest. He knew this place. A figure flickered into existence before him. Tall, emaciated, wrapped in a blood-red scarf, his body a tapestry of blades. The hero killer, Stain, a perfect holographic recreation, programmed with all available data on his fighting style and speed. Your first lesson, Luther's voice boomed. Eradicate the threat. No hesitation. No mercy. He's not real, Izuku muttered, trying to steady his breathing. His blade will feel real if it cuts you, Luther replied coldly. The Crucible's tactile feedback systems are quite effective. Begin. Stain lunged, a blade flashing. Izuku reacted on instinct, one for all at 8% flaring around him. He moved, dodged, and fought just as he had before. He was faster now, his base level stronger, but his movements were the same. He tried to disarm, to incapacitate. He fought to save, even a hologram. He was failing. The Stain hologram was relentless, its programming perfectly mimicking the killer's fanaticism. It drove him back, its blades leaving stinging, shallow cuts that his suit registered as painful bioshocks. You are fighting his ideal, not the man himself. Luther's voice was sharp with disappointment. You see the symbol, not the target. You hesitate because you once respected his twisted conviction. Sentiment is a vulnerability, Izuku. Erase it. Stain's lunge was a feint. As Izuku moved to block, the hologram dropped low, sweeping his legs out from under him. As he fell, a blade was aimed at his throat. Izuku had no choice. In a panic, he kicked out, a 20% smash that was pure, desperate instinct. The hologram flickered and dissolved, the simulation ending. The holographic screen flared red. Analysis: victory achieved. Efficiency rating: 12%. Unnecessary damage sustained: 27%. Hesitation index: high. Sentimental response detected: unacceptable. Luther's voice was laced with contempt. You won through panicked luck, not skill. You allowed your emotions to dictate the flow of battle. You took unnecessary risks. You broke your own rule of maintaining a stable output. Run it again. The chamber reset. Stain reappeared. They fought again. And again. And again. For hours, Izuku fought the ghost of the hero killer. Luther's voice was a constant, merciless scalpel, dissecting his every move, his every thought. He pointed out every flicker of hesitation, every moment Izuku chose a non-optimal, less lethal path. He forced Izuku to relive his past battles, but through a new, brutal lens of pure efficiency. The next simulation was muscular. This time, the lesson was different. Izuku's instinct was to meet overwhelming force with overwhelming force, to push his body to its breaking point just as he had on that cliffside. You see a wall and you wish to become a battering ram, Luther admonished as the massive, muscle fiber-laced hologram charged. A foolish and wasteful strategy. You possess supersonic speed. Why engage in a contest of strength you can only win at extreme physical cost? He is a charging bull. Be the matador. Izuku fought, his body screaming in protest. Luther forced him to keep his output at a stable 15%, to use his speed and agility, not his raw power, to strike at weak points, the eyes, the joints, with cold, calculated precision. To treat the battle not as a desperate struggle for survival, but as a problem of physics to be solved. He learned to use muscular's own momentum against him, to turn his strength into a liability. The final blow wasn't a 1,000,000% Delaware-Detroit smash. It was a series of swift, precise 15% strikes to the hologram's knees, neck, and temple, delivered with a speed it couldn't counter. The behemoth fell. Efficiency rating: 78%. Unnecessary damage sustained: 4%. Hesitation index: low. Better, was all Luther said. Days turned into weeks. Under Luther's unforgiving tutelage, Izuku's relationship with One for All began to change. He stopped thinking of it as a sacred flame to be nurtured. He began to see it as Luther did, a raw, powerful energy source. His inner monologue, once filled with the encouraging echoes of All Might, was now a cold, constant stream of calculations. Output stable at 20%. Stress on the tibia is reaching 87% of tolerance. Shift power to the deltoids. Target, opponent's center of mass. Optimal strike vector acquired. He learned to use full cowling not as a full-body aura, but as a targeted, fluid system, shunting power to specific muscle groups in milliseconds. A 30% burst to his legs for a dodge, instantly dropping to 10% to stabilize, then a 40% surge to his arm for a strike, all without the full-body strain that would have once shattered him. He was becoming ruthlessly, terrifyingly efficient. The pain of using his power didn't vanish, but he learned to wall it off, to treat it as a number on a screen. He was detaching. He was mastering. When he was not in the crucible, he was in the war room. This was a dark, circular chamber, even more impressive than the Watchtower's command center. The entire wall was a single, 360-degree holographic display, capable of showing thousands of data streams at once. This was Luther's domain, the nexus of his global information network. Power without strategy is just brute force, Luther said, standing before the immense display. It's the tool of thugs and fools. It's Superman's primary failing. He is a hammer who believes every problem is a nail. We will not make that mistake. The screen lit up with footage of the Justice League. Hundreds of hours of it, compiled from every available source, news reports, satellite imagery, hacked security cameras, and Luther's own covert surveillance drones. Your next phase of training, Luther announced. You will analyze them. You will deconstruct them. You will learn their every strength, and you will find their every weakness. You will fill those pathetic little notebooks of yours not with hero worship, but with battle plans. And so Izuku watched. He watched Superman lift cruise ships from the ocean, and he noted the slight grimace of effort, calculating the upper limits of his strength. He watched Flash vibrate through walls, and he timed the frequency, theorizing how a counter-frequency could disrupt it. He watched, and his analytical mind, once a source of innocent fascination, became a cold, weaponized tool. He filled a new set of notebooks, sleek black databooks provided by Luther. Their pages were not filled with admiring sketches, but with cold, hard data. Subject: Superman, Kal-El/Clark Kent. Strengths: invulnerability, solar radiation dependent, flight, super speed, sublight, heat vision, precise, high temperature, etc. Immense. Weaknesses: 1. Physiological, kryptonite, multiple radiation types, red solar radiation, power negation. 2. Sensory, susceptible to sensory overload. High-frequency sonics and disorienting light patterns can bypass invulnerability. 3. Magical, no innate defense against magical energies. Highly vulnerable. 4. Psychological, Messiah complex. Possesses an absolute moral code that is both a strength and a crippling weakness. Can be manipulated by forcing impossible choices, e.g., save person A or person B. His need to be seen as a benevolent savior makes him predictable. He will always try to talk first. He will always minimize collateral damage, even at a tactical disadvantage. Exploit this. His connection to humanity, Lois Lane, Martha Kent, is his greatest vulnerability. A threat to them is a threat to his stability. He presented his findings to Luther, his voice flat and clinical. Superman's greatest weakness is not a green rock, it's his belief that he can save everyone, Izuku stated, pointing to a diagram on the screen. You don't fight him. You fight the people around him. You create a scenario where he cannot win, only choose who loses. It will break his focus, shake his resolve. It will make him angry. And an angry Superman is a sloppy Superman. Luther listened, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. Excellent. The boy who worshipped a god is now teaching me how to kill one. The irony is delicious. Continue. The Batman. Izuku swiped the screen, and the Dark Knight's profile appeared. Subject: Batman Bruce Wayne. Strengths: peak human condition, genius-level intellect, master strategist, master of 127 martial arts, vast wealth and technological resources. Weaknesses: 1. Physiological, human. He can be broken. He can bleed. He ages. 2. Tactical, over-reliance on technology and fear. His systems can be hacked, his gadgets countered. His intimidation tactics are ineffective against those who do not fear him or who understand his psychology. 3. Psychological, the core weakness. His entire crusade is built on unprocessed childhood trauma, the death of his parents. He is rigid, paranoid, and emotionally crippled. His no-kill rule is an obsession, a line he fears crossing because he knows he might not come back. This makes his actions predictable. He will never choose the most efficient, lethal solution. He also has a pathological need to control everything, to have a contingency plan for everything. The best way to defeat Batman is to introduce a variable he cannot predict, something that shatters his sense of control. Or, more simply, use his own family, his soldiers in his war on crime, against him. He cares for them, but his paranoia prevents him from fully trusting them. This creates exploitable seams in his network. Batman doesn't fight criminals, Izuku concluded, his voice devoid of emotion. He fights the memory of the man who killed his parents, over and over again. He's trapped in that alley. To beat him, you don't fight him in the streets of Gotham. You drag him back to that alley and make him relive his failure. Luther clapped, a single, sharp sound that echoed in the vast room. Bravo, Izuku. Truly. You see them not as heroes or monsters, but as systems to be analyzed and broken. You have exceeded all my expectations. In that moment, Izuku felt a surge of pride. It was a cold, sharp, and hollow feeling, nothing like the warm glow of All Might's approval. But it was approval nonetheless. He had pleased his new mentor. He had proven his worth. The screaming child in the back of his mind had fallen silent. The day finally came. After months of relentless, soul-crushing training, Luther summoned him not to the Crucible, or the War Room, but to a design lab. In the center of the room, on a circular platform, stood a suit of armor. It was a masterpiece of menacing, pragmatic design. It was forged from a dark, charcoal gray alloy, a composite of carbon nanotubes and proprietary metals that was light, flexible, and stronger than titanium. It was angular and sharp, designed to deflect blows and intimidate. The green elements of his old costume were still there, but they were no longer friendly. They were thin, razor-like lines of light, integrated circuits that pulsed with a malevolent emerald glow, designed to channel and vent the raw energy of One for All. The clumsy iron saws were gone, replaced by sleek, powerful boots integrated with kinetic dampeners and gravitic stabilizers. The gauntlets were heavy, reinforced, with visible energy ports at the knuckles and palms, designed to focus his smashes into piercing, armor-shattering blasts rather than wide, destructive shockwaves. The familiar, rabbit-ear-like appendages on his head were still there, but they were sharper, longer, more like the horns of a demon than the ears of a friendly hero. They now served as a high-gain communications and sensory array. A sleek, black helmet with a featureless, glowing green visor rested on a pedestal beside it. When worn, it would erase his face, his identity, leaving only a terrifying, inhuman symbol. A tool for a master craftsman, Luther said with reverence. It will help you regulate your power with unparalleled precision. The gauntlets will absorb the kinetic backlash, protecting your arms up to a 60% output. The suit's internal systems will brace your skeleton. The helmet's HUD will feed you tactical data in real time. It is everything you need to execute the strategies you have devised. Izuku walked toward it, his hand outstretched. He ran his fingers over the cool, smooth metal of the chest plate. It felt right. It was a reflection of what he had become, hard, efficient, and empty. What will you call yourself? Luther asked, standing beside him. The world will need a name for the force that is coming. I had considered Arbiter or Vanguard. Something that speaks to your new purpose. Izuku stared at the suit, at the dark, powerful symbol it represented. He thought of all the names he had been called. Izuku. Midoriya. Young Midoriya. But one name stuck out. A name that had once been a brand of failure, a curse whispered by his childhood bully. A name he had tried to redefine in a world that no longer existed for him. He would redefine it again. He looked at Luther, his eyes, for the first time, as cold and hard as his mentor's. No, he said, his voice quiet but absolute. I already have a name. He picked up the helmet, its green visor glowing like a baleful eye in the dim light. They threw away someone they thought was useless. A good-for-nothing. A Deku. He turned the helmet over in his hands. I will show them what that useless boy has become. I will make them choke on that name. When they see me, when they see what I can do, they will feel fear. And they will call me Deku. He slid the helmet on. The world dissolved into a stream of green data. His vitals appeared in the corner of his vision. The room's schematics overlaid themselves on his sight. A soft hum resonated as the suit's system synchronized with his biometrics. He was no longer Izuku Midoriya, the boy who cried. He was encased in a shell of anger and technology. He turned to face Luther, a dark, armored figure bathed in the suit's emerald glow. He was taller, broader, his humanity completely erased behind the blank visor. He was a symbol, forged in betrayal and tempered by ruthless logic. He was no longer a hero. He was a reckoning. The night air of Starling City was thick with the scent of salt from the bay and the fainter, more insidious smell of industrial pollution. It was a city trying to scrub away its grime with a veneer of gentrified glass and steel, but the decay was still there, lurking in the shadows of its gleaming towers. From his vantage point atop the roof of a rival corporation's skyscraper, Deku surveyed his target. Queen Consolidated's primary chemical processing plant. It sat on the industrial waterfront, a sprawling, ugly complex of rust-streaked silos, tangled pipes, and warehouses that squatted by the water's edge like a bloated, metallic beast. A plume of discolored vapor, barely visible against the dark, overcast sky, rose from its tallest smokestack, carrying its poison out over the bay. Inside the featureless, dark helmet, Deku's vision was a tapestry of data. The HUD, powered by Luther's unparalleled technology, overlaid the scene with a web of information. Green lines traced the plant's security perimeter, highlighting motion sensors and camera placements. Red icons marked the positions of the handful of security guards making their rounds, their patrol routes predicted by an algorithm with 98.7% accuracy. Blueprints of the entire facility were ghosted over the physical structure, allowing him to see through walls, to trace power conduits and network cables as if they were glowing arteries. He stood perfectly still, a silent, armored gargoyle against the city's neon glow. The suit was a second skin, cool and heavy, a constant reminder of his new purpose. It hummed with latent power, the integrated circuits in his gauntlets, and along his limbs glowing a soft, menacing emerald. He could feel one for all churning within him, no longer a raging furnace he struggled to contain, but a controlled fusion reaction at the core of his being, waiting to be unleashed with cold, calculated precision. All systems are green, Deku, Luther's voice, crisp and dispassionate, echoed in his ear through the helmet's encrypted comms. He was miles away, safe in his Gotham penthouse, watching this all unfold through Deku's eyes. The media package is prepped and ready for dissemination. The moment you acquire the target data, I will ensure it is on every news network and social media platform within 60 seconds. The world will be your audience. Acknowledged, Deku replied, his voice distorted by the helmet's modulator into a flat, synthetic baritone. The name still felt strange on his own tongue, a borrowed cloak of identity. But with each passing moment, it settled more comfortably on his shoulders. This was not a smash and grab. It was not a pro-hero's dramatic takedown of a cackling villain. This was, as Luther had drilled into him for weeks, a socio-economic decapitation strike. Queen Consolidated, under its new CEO, Simon Stagg, who had acquired it after Oliver Queen's public fall from grace and disappearance, was a paragon of corporate malfeasance. They preached green initiatives to the public while their Starling City plant was illegally dumping thousands of gallons of a highly toxic, carcinogenic byproduct, hexavalent chromium, directly into the bay. It was a slow, silent poison, causing a spike in cancer rates and birth defects in the working-class neighborhoods downstream. The Justice League knew about it. Or at least, their affiliates did. SDR Labs had flagged the anomalous toxicity levels months ago. But Stagg was a master of legal maneuvering. He buried the League's inquiries in mountains of litigation, injunctions, and jurisdictional challenges. He bought politicians, silenced whistleblowers, and hid his crimes behind a fortress of corporate law. The heroes, bound by their self-imposed rules of engagement, were fighting a war of attrition in the courts. A war they were losing, while people were dying. They'd play by the rules of a broken system, Luther's voice whispered in his memory. We are going to break the system. This was his first statement. His debut. He was not here to fight a man. He was here to destroy an idea. The idea that wealth and power could shield the wicked from justice. Phase 1 initiated, Deku said into the comms. He pushed off the rooftop. There was no explosive crackle of green lightning. The suit's gravitic stabilizers and kinetic dampeners absorbed the sound and force, turning a 40-story leap into a silent, controlled descent. He landed in the shadows of a shipping container just outside the perimeter fence with no more noise than a falling leaf. The impact, which would have once sent tremors up his legs, was reduced to a soft thud, the energy efficiently redistributed throughout the suit's frame. He moved through the shadows with a fluid grace born of relentless training in the crucible. He was a phantom, his dark armor blending into the industrial night. A security camera swiveled on its mount. Deku's HUD highlighted its visual cone in pale red. He passed beneath it, his timing perfect, his presence completely undetected. His target was not the main building, but a small, unassuming network junction box on the far side of the complex. It was the least guarded sector, dismissed by security as non-critical. A fatal mistake. It was the hub for the plant's internal, isolated data network, the one that stored the real, unedited chemical sensor readings, waste disposal logs, and falsified compliance reports. The data Stag's lawyers claimed didn't exist. 2 guards stood near the junction, sharing a cigarette, their conversation lazy and bored. They were just men doing a job, a fact the old Izuku would have agonized over. He would have tried to find a way to avoid them, to ensure they weren't harmed. The new Deku saw them only as variables. Obstacles. Hesitation is a vulnerability. Luther's voice was a ghost in his head. He shunted 10% of one for all into his legs. The power surged silent and contained. He moved. He was a blur of motion, too fast for the human eye to properly track in the poor lighting. Before the first guard could even register his presence, Deku was behind him. A precise chop to the back of the neck, delivered with the reinforced edge of his gauntlet. The guard crumpled without a sound. The second guard turned, his eyes widening in shock, his mouth opening to shout. Deku's arm shot out, his fingers clamping over the man's mouth, stifling the alarm. With his other hand, he delivered a sharp, calculated blow to the man's temple. It wasn't a smash. It was a meticulously controlled strike, just enough force to render him unconscious, not enough to cause a concussion. Efficient. Clinical. He laid the 2 men gently on the ground in the shadows, out of sight of any remaining cameras. No alarms had been raised. The entire engagement had taken less than 3 seconds. He turned to the junction box. Ripping it open would be crude and might trigger a silent alarm. Instead, he placed a small, spider-like device from his utility belt onto its surface. The device, a LexCorp data leech, whirred silently, its microscopic legs drilling into the casing and tapping directly into the fiber optic cables within. "I'm in," Deku said. "I see it," Luther replied. "Firewall is formidable. An old Wayne-Tech security suite. I'm running counter protocols now. It will take approximately 90 seconds to grant you full access." "Understood," Deku replied, his eyes scanning the perimeter. "I will secure the objective in the meantime." His true target was inside the main processing facility. Silo 7. According to Luther's intelligence, it was where they stored the pure, undiluted runoff before it was gradually and illegally bled into the bay under the cover of night. He moved toward the main building. A heavy, magnetically locked steel door blocked his path. He could tear it from its hinges, but the noise would be a problem. Instead, he looked up. A ventilation shaft, 20 feet up the wall. He crouched, channeling power into his legs. Not for a jump, but for a different application he had perfected. He placed his hands on the brick wall, fingers spread. He activated the microscopic van der Waals manipulators in his gloves, a piece of stolen Blue Beetle tech that Luther had reverse-engineered. The suit's system synchronized, allowing him to adhere to the surface. Silently, he began to climb the wall, moving with the uncanny, silent grace of a spider. He was a creature of the night, a piece of living technology ascending the grimy brick. He reached the vent, the cover held in place by industrial bolts. A waste of time to unscrew. He focused a tiny, precise burst of 1 for all, less than 1%, into the fingertips of his right hand. The metal around the bolts glowed cherry red for a fraction of a second, the heat so intense and localized it made no sound. The bolts melted. He pulled the cover free and slipped inside. The ventilation system was a dark, cramped maze. His helmet switched to thermal vision, painting the world in shifting patterns of blue, yellow, and red. He could see the heat signatures of workers in the control rooms below, the hot glow of the chemical processors, the cold emptiness of the unused corridors. He moved through the shafts like a wraith, his path guided by the blueprints in his HUD. The firewall is down, Luther's voice came through the comms. You have full access to their network. Download everything. The raw data, internal emails, shipping manifests, Stag's personal expense reports. I want it all. Copy, Deku said, not breaking his stride. From his wrist guard, a thin antenna extended, establishing a direct link with the data leech outside. A progress bar appeared in the corner of his vision. Data transfer, 1%. 2%. He arrived at a ventilation grate directly above his destination. The main floor of the processing plant. Below him was a cavernous space filled with humming machinery, and the acrid smell of chemicals. In the center of the room stood Silo 7, a monstrous, 60-foot-tall metal cylinder. A single technician was monitoring a nearby console, his face illuminated by the green glow of the screen. Deku dropped from the shaft, his suit's systems absorbing the 20-foot fall. He landed in a perfect three-point crouch behind a bank of servers, completely silent. The technician didn't even look up from his screen. Data transfer, 87%. Now for the final piece of the puzzle. The proof. He moved from behind the servers. The technician, finally sensing a presence, turned. His eyes went wide with terror at the sight of the dark, armored figure standing before him, its visor a blank, glowing void. Before he could scream, Deku crossed the distance in a single, silent step and a hand clamped over his mouth. Do not make a sound, Deku's modulated voice commanded, low and menacing. I am not here to harm you. I am here for a sample. Open the primary valve on Silo 7. The technician, trembling, shook his head frantically. It's a direct violation of— I am aware of what it is a violation of, Deku interrupted, his grip tightening slightly. Open it. Now. The technician, weeping with fear, fumbled his way to the silo's control panel. With shaking hands, he typed in a code and pulled a heavy lever. A valve near the base of the silo opened with a hiss of pressurized air. A thick, viscous, black-green liquid began to ooze out, pooling on the reinforced concrete floor. The smell was horrific, a chemical stench so vile it made Deku's eyes water, a sensation his helmet's filters quickly neutralized. He produced a small, shielded vial from his belt and collected a sample of the effluent. He sealed it, the vial's exterior displaying a bright red biohazard symbol. This was the undeniable, physical evidence, the smoking gun. Data transfer, 100%. Complete. I have the package, Lex, Deku said into his comms. All objectives met. Excellent. Luther's voice was filled with a cold, triumphant glee. Disseminating now. Phase 2 is yours to execute. Make your statement, Deku. The world is watching. Deku turned back to the terrified technician, who was now huddled on the floor. Evacuate the building. Tell everyone to get out. You have 5 minutes. He didn't wait for a reply. He walked to the center of the room, the vial secured on his belt. He took a deep breath, feeling the hum of the suit, the thrum of 1 for all waiting beneath his skin. This was the part the old him would have hated. The destruction. The violence. But the new Deku understood its necessity. This wasn't just about exposing a crime. It was about delivering a sentence. It was about creating a symbol of fear. A warning. Beginning phase 2, he announced. He planted his feet, sinking into a low stance. He drew his right arm back, the energy ports on his gauntlet glowing with a furious, blinding intensity. Green lightning, no longer suppressed but deliberately unleashed, erupted from his body, crawling over the dark metal of his suit like a living thing. He pushed the output past the suit's recommended limits: 40%, 50%, 60%. The suit groaned under the strain, the kinetic dampeners whining as they struggled to contain the raw power. He wasn't targeting the silo. He was targeting its structural supports. The core of the facility. He let out a guttural roar, a sound that was half human, half machine, and punched forward. Detroit smash. The blow was not a wide shockwave. The gauntlet focused the immense force into a concentrated, piercing beam of pure kinetic energy. It struck the base of Silo 7, and the result was catastrophic. The reinforced concrete and steel vaporized. The entire 60-foot structure lurched, its foundation gone. With a groan of tortured metal, the massive silo toppled, crashing through machinery and support beams like a fallen god. It ruptured on impact. Thousands of gallons of the black-green poison flooded the facility floor. But Deku wasn't done. He was a whirlwind of calculated destruction. A 30% kick obliterated a row of chemical processors, sending sparks and shrapnel flying. A 45% backhand blow collapsed a section of the ceiling. He moved through the plant like a force of nature, his every strike precise, targeting load-bearing walls, critical machinery, and power conduits. He wasn't just wrecking the plant, he was systematically executing it, ensuring it could never be rebuilt. Alarms finally blared, their shrill cry a symphony accompanying his destruction. Workers were screaming, fleeing the building just as he had commanded. He ignored them. They were irrelevant. His mission was the structure itself. Within 4 minutes, the entire interior of the plant was a hellscape of fire, twisted metal, and chemical sludge. He stood in the center of the chaos he had wrought, the fires casting flickering, demonic shadows on his dark armor. His mission was complete. Miles away, Simon Stagg was jolted awake by the frantic buzzing of his phone. He answered it, his voice thick with sleep and irritation. It was his plant foreman, screaming hysterically. "Sir! The plant! Oh God, it's gone! Something, it destroyed everything!" At the same time, in newsrooms and living rooms across the globe, phones were also buzzing. A massive, encrypted data package had just been anonymously dumped onto every major server. News anchors stared at their teleprompters, their expressions turning from confusion to shock. Social media feeds exploded. The world was suddenly flooded with the unedited, irrefutable truth of Queen Consolidated's crimes. Internal emails detailing the cover-up. Falsified environmental reports side by side with the real, horrifying data. And most damning of all, a live, high-definition video feed. The feed was from a single, stationary point, looking out over the Starling City Bay. It showed the Queen Consolidated plant, now wreathed in smoke and fire, and as the world watched, a figure emerged from the flames. It was tall, armored in black and green, its form silhouetted against the inferno. It walked out of the wreckage with a calm, deliberate stride, a conquering general leaving a fallen city. It stopped at the edge of the pier, the polluted waters of the bay churning below. Then, slowly, it raised its head, its blank, glowing visor seeming to stare into the very soul of every person watching. As the armored figure stood there, a silent, terrifying monument to the destruction behind it, text began to appear on the screen. Simple, white letters against the black of the night sky. Simon Stagg and Queen Consolidated poisoned this city for profit. They hid behind lawyers and politicians. They believed they were untouchable. They were wrong. The system that protects men like him is broken. This is not vengeance. This is a correction. There are no more untouchable men. There are no more safe hideouts. Your wealth will not protect you. Your heroes will not save you. Judgment is coming for you all. The figure then leaped, a silent, powerful arc into the night sky, vanishing from view. The feed cut out, leaving only a final, chilling image. A stylized, angular letter D, glowing a sickly green, before the screen went black. On the watchtower, the mood was one of stunned horror. The founders of the Justice League stood around the central monitor, watching the same feed as the rest of the world. They saw the destruction, read the manifesto. "It's him." Batman's voice was a low, gravelly rumble of fury and dawning dread. He zoomed in on the armored figure, his systems trying in vain to get a clear reading through the comm jamming technology that surrounded the feed. The tactical precision, the power signature, even masked, it's him. He didn't just expose them, Bruce, Superman said, his face pale. He looked utterly shaken. He executed them. He passed judgment, and carried out the sentence himself. Millions of dollars in property damage, an environmental disaster. That he also exposed, Wonder Woman corrected softly, her expression conflicted. He has done a monstrous thing. But he has also brought a hidden evil to light. The people of that city, they are not mourning the loss of that plant. Look at the live social feeds. Many are calling him a hero. She was right. The initial shock was already giving way to a wave of polarized, furious debate. But a significant, vocal portion of the public was celebrating. They saw not a terrorist, but a champion of the common man. Someone who had finally held the corrupt and powerful accountable in a way the heroes never seemed to. He's creating a new ideology, Clark, Batman said, his hands clenched into fists on the console. He's not just a villain. He's a symbol. He's framing himself as the justice the system, and by extension we, fail to deliver. This is an ideological attack. Superman looked at the final, lingering symbol on the screen. The green D. Deku. The name the boy had called himself. A hero's name, now twisted into a brand of terror and revolutionary justice. He remembered the boy's face in the observation room, the tears, the raw anguish of betrayal. The hope he had crushed. And he felt a sickening knot of guilt tighten in his stomach. This monster, this terrifying, efficient, and chillingly popular monster, he had helped create it. Meanwhile, soaring through the night sky in a stolen, untraceable LexCorp stealth jet, Deku removed his helmet. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow calm. He looked at his reflection in the dark canopy of the cockpit. The face staring back was pale, his eyes wide and haunted. The screaming child was still there, horrified by the destruction, by the cold efficiency with which he had acted. But as he stared, he felt a grim, unfamiliar sensation rise within him. It wasn't joy. It wasn't pride. It was satisfaction. A dark, cold satisfaction. He had saved those people in Starling City. Not with a smile, but with a fist. He hadn't just stopped a villain for a day. He had surgically removed a cancer from the city's heart. The cost was high, the methods terrifying. But the result was undeniable. The problem was solved. Permanently. This, he thought, staring out at the dark world below. This is what it means to be a hero. He was starting to believe it. And that was the most terrifying thing of all.